Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really dig in, take this huge pile of global news, the latest science, big tech moves, geopolitical shifts, and we try to make sense of it all for you.
And the pile is huge today. I mean, look at the sources we've got. We're bouncing from, the outer edges of the solar system, things the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, is finding.
Right.
Straight into the messy stuff, AI developments moving at light speed, and some really intense political pressure points, like U.S. military leadership, foreign policy. It's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. So our mission today for you is basically to give you that shortcut. We want you walking away feeling like you've got a handle on, say, these weird dark beads they found near Saturn, or what's really behind a 42-cent government AI contract. Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
And maybe understand a bit more about that sudden big meeting of generals down at Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah, the sources are all over the map, from quantum physics to, UN speeches. But there's a theme, I think.
Which is
Acceleration. Everything seems to be speeding up the tech, the political changes, and how quickly the consequences hit us. We'll try and trace that thread through this whole deep dive.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's not wait then. Let's dive right in, starting way out there in the cosmos. Because, well, the universe always has surprises, doesn't it? You'd think after all this time, all the probes, we'd have a pretty good grip on the big planets in our solar system, Saturn especially.
You would think. But the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, its recent observations have just, scrambled what we thought we knew about Saturn's atmosphere. It's pretty wild.
How so? What's it seeing that's different?
Well, its infrared capabilities are just incredible. It can see through layers of gas and haze that were basically invisible before. And the strangest thing, the most talked about finding, is these features scientists are calling dark beads.
Dark beads. Okay, that sounds intriguing. A little sci-fi. What are they, and why are they such a big deal?
Yeah, it does sound a bit sci-fi. They're really unusual. The exact composition still being heavily debated. But the main theory suggests they're linked to pockets of, high-density particulate matter deep down.
Particulate matter? Like what? Dust? Smoke?
Could be complex hydrocarbons, think heavier, almost soot-like molecules. Or maybe even weird forms of methane ice that are getting churned up from much lower atmospheric levels. The crucial part is they don't seem to follow the rules of Saturn's weather as we understand them.
So they're basically challenging the models, the GCM, the general circulation model that scientists use to predict how the atmosphere flows and what the weather does on Saturn.
That's it, exactly. They're implying that the way gases and energy move around, the atmospheric dynamics are, a lot more complicated and irregular than the models predicted.
Yeah.
And if these beads are stable structures, sticking around for a while, that means there must be some pretty powerful localized forces holding them together against Saturn's, incredibly violent winds.
Wow. Okay. And wasn't there something else? Something about star patterns?
Right. The JWST also picked up what the reports called wonky star patterns.
Yeah.
Basically, seeing irregular distortions of light from stars behind Saturn as it passes through the planet's upper atmosphere.
Okay. And those wonky patterns, why are they interesting? Seems subtle.
It's because they're visible evidence of chaos happening underneath, stuff we can't see directly. It suggests intense, complicated interactions deep down, maybe big churning currents below the cloud tops that are bending the light in weird ways as it comes through.
Huh. Like seeing ripples on a pond and knowing something big shifted way down deep.
Precisely. It gives us these observable clues about the powerful forces and deep currents we can't actually image directly. It's clever stuff.
And JWST isn't just looking at planets, is it? It's doing fundamental work elsewhere in the galaxy, too.
Oh, absolutely. Its power isn't limited to our neighborhood. It's also giving us these groundbreaking views of star formation way deep in the Milky Way, specifically in a region called Sagittarius B2.
Sagittarius B2, why is that spot so important?
Because it's massive. It contains something like half the total gas mass in the entire center of our galaxy. It's a huge stellar nursery.
Yeah.
But it's always been hidden behind incredibly dense dust.
Ah, so older telescopes couldn't see through it.
Exactly. But JWOK's infrared vision, it cuts right through that dust veil. So now we can see, in really stunning detail, the very early stages of star birth, how and where stars form in that super dense, chaotic core of the Milky Way. It's fundamental stuff.
Okay, amazing. Let's shift focus now from stars being born billions of years ago to Well, to us being born, in a way. NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, they did something really smart, didn't they? Mixing space with human history on an asteroid.
Yeah, this is a really cool convergence. NASA has officially named geological features on this asteroid, called Donald Johanson, after some famous human origin sites on Earth.
Like where?
Places like Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, parts of the Great Rift Valley in eastern Africa. Really significant spots in paleoanthropology.
And the asteroid itself is named after Donald Johanson, right? The paleontologist who co-discovered Lucy, that famous ancient hominin fossil.
That's the one.
So why do this? Why link a space rock to, digging up old bones? What's the strategy?
It's really about outreach and perspective, I think. It's a deliberate way to get more people interested in both space and our own origins. By putting names like Olduvai Gorge on features of an asteroid, NASA creates this compelling link.
Makes sense.
It kind of emphasizes that understanding where we came from, anthropology, archaeology, it's all part of the same big story as exploring where we are now, cosmically speaking. It makes space feel a bit more connected to us,
Yeah, it makes archaeology seem less dusty. I like it. Okay, sticking with Earth science from space, there was a big milestone for the NISAR satellite too, right? First images.
Yes, huge step for NISAR. That's the NASA IRO Synthetic Aperture Radar satellite. It just sent back its first detailed images of Earth's surface. This marks the real start of its operational mission.
And the ISRO part, that's the Indian Space Research Organization.
Correct. This is a major collaboration between NASA and ISRO, a really important partnership.
Okay, let's talk tech for a second. The key thing with NISAR is the radar system, isn't it? It uses two different types.
Precisely. That's the game changer. It has both L-band and S-band radar. The L-band uses a longer wavelength, which is really crucial because it can penetrate deeper through vegetation into soil, even through ice.
So that's good for things like tracking soil moisture, deforestation.
Exactly. Monitoring agriculture, watching how glaciers are moving, measuring subsidence, really valuable stuff. And then the S-band has a shorter wavelength, which is better for mapping the surface itself, tracking smaller changes in land cover, and assessing damage after disasters.
So the first images we saw, like the ones of Mount Desert Island in Maine or parts of North Dakota in the U.S., they basically show that this whole dual system works. It's delivering the goods.
It absolutely validates the whole concept and the partnership. It means scientists around the world are about to get this incredibly rich, consistent stream of data on how our planet is changing. Essential for things like climate modeling, managing resources, responding to earthquakes or floods. You name it.
Very cool. Okay, before we leave space behind entirely, anything cool to look for in the night sky coming up?
Well, astronomers are always excited about the Orionid meteor shower. That should be visible. It's always a good show. Caused by Earth flying through the debris trail left by Halley's Comet.
Ah, leftovers from Halley's. Nice.
And maybe circle September 27th on your calendar. There's going to be a really beautiful conjunction. The waxing crescent moon will be right near the bright red Supergian star Antares. Look low in the southwestern sky just after sunset. Should be quite striking, that reddish star next to the moon.
Noted. September 27th. And looking further ahead, NASA's thinking about the moon again, right? With this lander challenge.
Yeah, they're looking ahead to 2026 with the Human Lander Challenge. This is all part of the Artemis program, the big push to get humans back to the moon, but this time sustainably.
So what are they challenging people to do? They're asking teams from universities, from private companies to come up with innovative ideas for life support and environmental control systems for lunar landers and habitats. We're talking about the really hard stuff. Closed-loop systems that can recycle air, water, maybe even process waste reliably for long durations. The kind of tech you absolutely need if you're going to move beyond just planting a flag and actually have people living and working there.
Exactly. It shows NASA is strategically tapping into expertise outside its own walls to solve these incredibly tough engineering problems needed for a permanent lunar presence. Okay. From, slow cosmic evolution to the fast-track engineering for Artemis, you can really feel that acceleration we talked about. Let's bring that speed right down to Earth now and talk about the tech that's reshaping things almost daily. Artificial intelligence, right? Yeah. The universe might take billions of years, but AI, wow, it feels like it evolves into weeks or months sometimes. And right now, two huge players are making massive waves. OpenAI with GPT-5 and Elon Musk's Grok. Yeah, the release of OpenAI's GPT-5 back on August 7th, 2025. That's being seen as a pretty significant moment. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman made a pretty bold claim, didn't he? Called it PhD-level competence.
PhD level, that sounds intense. What does that actually translate to when people started testing it? Did it feel like a quantum leap?
Well, the PhD level seems to refer to its supposed ability to bridge what they call non-reasoning and reasoning tasks. So older models were great at non-reasoning, pattern matching, summarizing text quickly, writing stuff based on statistics.
Right, spitting out plausible text.
Exactly. GPT-5 is claimed to make real progress in reasoning. That means things like handling complex, multi-step problems, doing logical deduction across different fields, maybe solving problems that need synthesizing abstract ideas.
So the early testers, they did notice a big improvement in those complex areas, like advanced coding or scientific analysis, even if maybe for the average user, it wasn't quite the same shock as going from GPT-3 to GPT-4.
That seems to be the consensus, yeah.
Mhm.
A substantial leap in tackling tricky, structured problems. And the key thing is this power is instantly out there through ChatGPT, through Microsoft's Copilot, and available via the API for developers.
So the rollout is immediate and widespread.
Massive integration right off the bat. But while OpenAI seems focused on pushing the capability envelope, you've got xAI, Elon Musk's company, focused squarely on, well, getting its foot in the door, especially with the U.S. government.
Ah, yes, the Grok deal. The deal that xAI made with the U.S. General Services Administration, the GSA. I mean, that pricing strategy is just audacious isn't the word for it.
It's pure market disruption, offering their Grok chatbot to basically every federal agency for, what was it, 42 cents per agency over 18 months.
42 cents. It's symbolic, obviously.
Completely symbolic. But it means federal agencies get access to a pretty advanced large language model, an LLM, for practically nothing. It just massively undercuts competitors like OpenAI or Anthropic, who are charging, potentially millions for government access.
It's clearly a strategy to just get Grok in everywhere, establish a foothold. But Grok has had its issues, hasn't it? There was scrutiny before about problematic outputs, even anti-Semitic comments in some cases. How does that history square with this big government push?
And that's the core tension, isn't it? The ethics versus the speed of adoption. Musk and xAI emphasize the huge potential upside, automating bureaucracy, analyzing data better, maybe transforming public services,
Sure.
but realizing that potential depends entirely on having really strong regulatory oversight and continuously fixing the model to prevent those past issues. The current administration seems very keen on adopting AI quickly, so there's always a risk that deployment speed might, outpace the exhaustive ethical vetting. It's a balancing act, a tricky one.
Yeah. And speaking of AI saturation, on the other end of the spectrum, the consumer side, we're seeing this backlash, this idea of AI slop starting to gain traction.
Right. Meta's new short-form video feed, the one called Vibes, has
Yeah.
kind of become the poster child for this criticism. AI slop basically refers to that flood of low-effort, formulaic content videos, images that are generated super quickly using automated tools.
And they get pushed because they game the algorithm.
Pretty much. They're optimized purely for engagement metrics, clicks, views, shares, often completely sacrificing any real artistry, human creativity, or even basic quality. It's that feeling of volume just drowning out substance.
Okay. Shifting from maybe low-quality content to high-stakes failure. There was a really concerning data privacy incident involving a popular app, wasn't there? The Neon call recording app.
Yeah, that was a bad one. A dramatic failure. Neon, which had become quite popular for recording calls, apparently had a major security flaw.
What kind of flaw?
A really serious one. It exposed users' phone numbers, the actual raw audio recordings of their calls, and the text transcripts generated from those calls. Just wide open, potentially affecting millions of users.
That's terrifying. But the ethical problem wasn't just the security bug, was it? It was tied into how the app made money in the first place.
Absolutely. That's the deeper issue. Neon's business model involved monetizing those private conversations. They were apparently selling the data, the recordings, the transcripts to other AI companies.
For what? Training their own AI models.
Presumably, yeah.
Yeah.
For model training, data analysis, users might have gotten some nominal compensation, but essentially their private spoken words were the product being sold.
Wow.
So the very system set up to profit from conversations created the vulnerability that exposed them.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of the risks baked into these aggressive data monetization strategies, especially with sensitive data like voice recordings. Yeah, that's deeply uncomfortable. Okay, another ethical hotspot involving a tech giant, Microsoft, and its complex dealings with military clients, specifically the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF.
Right.
Microsoft took the significant step of temporarily disabling some of its cloud services, specifically Azure services, for one particular unit within the IDF.
Why? What triggered that?
It followed an internal review by Microsoft. They concluded that claims were substantiated, suggesting this specific unit was using the services in an exploitative way that violated Microsoft's terms of service. The violation apparently related to civilian mass surveillance.
Okay, so disabling services is a big deal, but it was targeted, right? Not a complete cutoff of all services to the IDF.
Right. Exactly. And that nuance tells you a lot about the tightrope these huge tech companies have to walk in conflict zones. The vast majority of Microsoft's contracts with the IDF, providing basic cloud infrastructure and so on, they remain active.
So it's a signal, but not a full withdrawal.
It's a very visible enforcement of boundaries when a specific serious violation is confirmed, especially something as sensitive as mass surveillance using their tools. But it also shows how hard it is for these global tech firms to fully detach from powerful military clients once that infrastructure is deeply embedded. Even a temporary suspension sends a message, though. A complex situation. Okay, before we pivot to the heavy geopolitical stuff, let's end this segment on a couple of potentially really exciting hardware breakthroughs. First up, actual holograms on your phone. Is that getting closer? It might be. This research comes out of the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. They've developed a new kind of pixel that can generate true holographic displays. The key is combining OLED's organic light-emitting diodes, the tech in many high-end phone screens,
Right.
with something called holographic metasurfaces.
Metasurfaces. Okay, that sounds futuristic. How do they work? How do you get a 3D image from that?
Think of metasurfaces as incredibly thin materials engineered with features at the nanoscale, way smaller than the wavelength of light. These tiny structures can precisely bend and steer light rays at the individual pixel level.
So no need for bulky lenses or lasers like old-school holograms?
Exactly. These metasurfaces replace all that complex optics. They can shape the light coming from the OLED pixel to create a full 3D light field, making an image appear to hover in space above the screen. No special glasses needed. By integrating this with bright, fast OLEDs, they potentially found a way to make this scalable for devices like smartphones.
Wow. Real 3D on phones. That could change gaming, design, communication, pretty much everything visual.
Huge potential, yeah. And the other big hardware news is in quantum networking. Engineers at the University of Pennsylvania made a breakthrough using what they call electron highways.
Electron highways. Intriguing name. What does that mean for quantum tech?
It's all about transmitting quantum information reliably. Quantum states are incredibly fragile. Any disturbance, noise, and the information is lost. That's called decoherence. These Penn engineers figured out a way to create these specific channels, these highways, within a material to guide the quantum particles carrying the information.
And it worked well.
Amazingly well. They achieved over 97% fidelity in transmitting the quantum information. Fidelity just means how accurately the information arrived compared to how it was sent.
And why is 97% such a big deal? Sounds high, but is it a magic number?
It's considered a critical threshold. Getting reliability that high suggests they've really cracked a major part of the problem, maintaining that delicate quantum state over distance and time within a practical system.
And the bigger picture implication.
Well, reliable transmission is the absolute key to building large-scale quantum networks. If you can send quantum information dependably, you can unlock things like truly unhackable communication, superpowered distributed quantum computing. It could fundamentally change cybersecurity and secure data sharing globally. It's foundational work for that future quantum internet.
Okay. From the almost impossibly small quantum world to the very large, very real pressures of global politics. Let's make that jump now. Time to look at geopolitics and U.S. political strategy. All right, shifting gears dramatically now. The domestic political scene in the U.S., particularly around the military, has been, well, intense. Let's start with this highly unusual meeting called by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth down at Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah, that was really something. Calling hundreds of top military leaders, we're talking one-star generals and admirals, and up for an urgent, almost snap meeting at the Marine Corps base Quantico, that's not normal procedure. It immediately signaled something major was happening, or about to happen.
And the context here is crucial, isn't it? Hegseth's time as Defense Secretary has been marked by some really sweeping and frankly controversial changes already.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a period of significant upheaval. He's been very publicly aligned with President Trump's push for what they call a warrior ethos in the military.
Which translates to?
Well, actions like a reported 20% cut in the number of four-star generals, numerous dismissals of other high-ranking officers, often with little public explanation. Plus, he's been spearheading the effort to scrap diversity and inclusion programs within the services.
And didn't he also support President Trump wanting to change the name back to the Department of War?
Yes, strongly supported that symbolic but significant move to reinstate the historical name for the Department of Defense. It all fits a pattern of trying to reshape the institution's culture and structure quickly and decisively.
There was also that decision about the Medals of Honor from Wounded Knee in the 1890s,
Yeah.
right? That caused a stir.
A highly charged decision, yes. Congress had previously recommended rescinding the Medals of Honor awarded to about 20 soldiers involved in what is widely regarded as a massacre at Wounded Knee. Secretary Hegseth reversed that, deciding not to rescind them.
Which critics saw as
As a politically motivated move, aimed at appealing to a certain base, reinforcing a specific hardline view of military history and authority, even in the face of ethical concerns raised by historians, Native American groups, and others.
So you have this backdrop of rapid top-down change, shaking up the hierarchy, pushing a new ethos, and then this sudden urgent meeting at Quantico. What are the potential implications for the military itself? For stability, morale, especially with global tensions being what they are?
Well, the immediate impact is likely deep uncertainty within the ranks, especially at senior levels. You have career officers, people who've spent decades in the institution, suddenly navigating a climate where loyalty to the administration's specific agenda might seem to outweigh traditional military processes or even established protocol.
A chilling effect, maybe.
Could be. Analysts definitely worry that these kinds of rapid, politically driven changes could disrupt strategic planning, damage trust within the officer corps, and potentially harm operational effectiveness at a time when, as you say, global stability feels pretty fragile. Coherence is key in military operations.
And speaking of fragile global stability, the rhetoric between Russia and NATO seems to be escalating dangerously. There was a stark warning from Russia's ambassador to France recently.
Extremely stark. The ambassador, Alexei Meshkov, basically drew a red line. He said very clearly that if NATO forces were to shoot down a Russian warplane, this was following allegations of Russian planes violating airspace over the Baltic Sea near NATO borders. That act would be considered an act of war. Full stop, implying direct conflict between Russia and NATO.
That's blunt. And Russia denies the airspace violations.
Yes, the Russian Defense Ministry put out statements saying their aircraft, MiG-31s, I believe, were just conducting routine flights over neutral waters following all international rules.
So you have claim versus counterclaim, the classic recipe for escalation, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And this kind of sharp warning fits with broader statements from Moscow. For example, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has been saying that NATO and the European Union are effectively already waging war against Russia through their deep involvement and support for Ukraine.
How does he frame that?
Lavrov characterizes Western actions as being driven by, quote, neo-colonial ambitions, and claims they fundamentally ignore the UN Charter. He positions Russia's actions as a defensive response to what they see as an aggressive, encroaching Western alliance. It's a narrative of encirclement and resistance.
Okay, let's shift focus geographically but stay with intense conflict. The situation in the Middle East, specifically in the Gaza Strip, sounds utterly dire based on the sources.
Catastrophic is probably the right word, especially looking at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. The hospital director there has been issuing desperate warnings. Patients are dying, he says, simply because they're overwhelmed. Too many casualties arriving, not enough resources, staff, medicine, beds, fuel, and competition, compounded by ongoing Israeli airstrikes happening nearby.
And there were reports about the types of injuries being seen.
Yes, medical staff reported seeing injuries they describe as unlike previous conflicts. They use the term military-style injuries, suggesting the use of extremely destructive weaponry impacting civilians, causing devastating trauma.
This humanitarian crisis and the broader conflict obviously dominated discussions at the recent United Nations General Assembly. We saw some very public diplomatic clashes, particularly around the speeches by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely. President Abbas, who spoke virtually, was defiant. His core message was, Palestinians will not leave. He strongly condemned Israeli actions, using the term genocide, but, and this is significant, he also explicitly condemned Hamas's attack on October 7th. He seemed to be trying to separate the Palestinian Authority politically from Hamas.
And his call to action.
He called for immediate ceasefires and urged the world to recognize Palestinian rights based on international law and UN resolutions.
Netanyahu's speech, on the other hand, triggered a very visible protest inside the assembly hall.
It did. A significant number of delegates, mainly from Arab and African nations, stood up and walked out while he was speaking. a very pointed public rebuke of his government's policies and actions in Gaza.
How did Netanyahu respond?
He essentially ignored the walkout, or at least didn't acknowledge it in his speech. He vowed to finish the job against Hamas, rejected accusations of war crimes as baseless, and importantly, he reiterated his firm rejection of a two-state solution. He argued that creating a Palestinian state now would be seen as rewarding Hamas and would pose an existential threat to Israel.
So very entrenched positions amidst this diplomatic deadlock and the crisis on the ground. Are other countries trying to intervene?
There are attempts, yes. Notably, Spain and Italy took the step of deploying warships. Their stated mission is to protect something called the Global Sumud Flotilla, or GSF.
What's the GSF?
It's described as a civilian fleet attempting to carry humanitarian aid directly into Gaza, trying to break the blockade. By sending warships, Spain and Italy are essentially trying to provide a naval escort, signaling they want this aid delivered and warning against any interference with the flotilla. It's a significant geopolitical move aimed at bypassing the existing Israeli restrictions on aid entry.
Okay, let's pivot back to the U.S. and President Trump's economic policies. More shockwaves there, this time with a new round of tariffs announced.
Yes, sweeping new tariffs. The headline grabber is probably the massive 100% tariff slapped on imported pharmaceuticals.
100%. Wow.
Doubling the price, effectively. He also targeted specific manufacturing sectors, high tariffs on imported trucks and kitchen cabinets, and I believe a 30% tariff on all imported furniture as well.
The goal presumably is the same as previous tariff rounds. Protect American industries, push the America First agenda.
That's the stated rationale, yes. Protect American manufacturers, bring jobs back, level the playing field.
But the criticisms are likely the same too, aren't they? What are the main concerns being raised about these new tariffs?
Well, the most immediate worry is obviously consumer prices, especially for something like pharmaceuticals. A 100% tariff on imported generics could make essential medicines unaffordable for many people very quickly.
Right.
Beyond that, there's the fear of retaliation. Critics warn that major trading partners, especially the EU and China, are likely to hit back with their own tariffs on U.S. goods. That could spark a wider trade war, hurting American exporters, disrupting supply chains, and potentially damaging the overall global economy.
And domestically, the administration is also playing hardball on the budget front, right? Threatening federal workers if a deal isn't reached.
Yes, President Trump issued a very direct warning. Essentially, mass firings of federal employees if Congress doesn't pass a budget deal by the October 1st deadline. An Office of Management and Budget memo, that's OMB, actually directed agencies to start preparing contingency plans for potentially laying off thousands of workers permanently.
Which workers? Are they targeting specific areas?
The memo apparently targeted programs deemed non-essential or those not aligned with the administration's specific policy priorities.
And how's that going down in Congress?
Predictably, not well with opponents. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, for example, called it mafia-style blackmail. The argument is that threatening workers' jobs like this undermines vital government services, potentially violates employment laws, and basically weaponizes the budget process itself, creating unnecessary chaos and instability.
Okay. One last item in this segment, connecting back to our tech discussion earlier, digital identity. There's a big proposal on the table in the United Kingdom.
That's right. The UK Prime Minister has proposed making digital IDs mandatory for all adults in the country.
Mandatory. What's the official reason given for that?
The mere justifications are combating illegal working, making it harder for employers to hire people without the right to work, and also streamlining how people verify their identity for government services, accessing benefits, things like that, making things more efficient, supposedly.
But you say mandatory digital ID, and alarm bells immediately start ringing for privacy advocates, don't they?
Instantly. This plugs right into that global debate about privacy versus security and government power. It's definitely part of this wider international trend we're seeing towards creating centralized digital identity systems.
And the downsides people worry about.
The big concerns are always government overreach, the potential for creating a surveillance state where the government knows too much about everyone's activities. There's also the massive security risk. If you put everyone's core identity data in one digital basket, that basket becomes an incredibly attractive target for hackers, potentially leading to catastrophic breaches.
And politically.
Opposition parties are questioning if it will actually solve the problems it claims to address, like illegal immigration, or if it's more about political signaling an expensive, potentially intrusive system that doesn't tackle the root causes. It's a huge debate.
Yeah, it really is. From trade wars to digital papers, the scope is just vast. Okay, let's try and end on a slightly more human note. Let's wrap up this deep dive looking at health, how our minds work, and some medical breakthroughs. All right, moving into our final segment, let's talk medical innovation. And there's some really exciting news for potentially millions, maybe hundreds of millions, of people worldwide dealing with arthritis pain.
Yeah, this comes out of the University of Cambridge in the UK. Researchers there have developed a really novel material, a hydrogel, that's designed to mimic natural cartilage in joints.
Okay, artificial cartilage is interesting, but what's the breakthrough part?
The breakthrough is that this gel is smart. It actually works as an autonomous drug delivery system.
Autonomous. What does that mean in this context? How does it work?
It means the gel can actually sense changes in its immediate environment within the joint. So when arthritis flares up, the joint becomes more inflamed and the local environment becomes more acidic. The pH level drops. This engineered gel can detect that drop in pH, that increased acidity. And when it does, it automatically starts releasing potent anti-inflammatory drugs right there, directly into the joint space where the inflammation is happening.
Wow. So it only releases the drug when and where it's needed.
Exactly. That's the definition of precision medicine, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the sources highlight a huge potential benefit. Because the drug release is localized right at the site of inflammation, it'd drastically minimize the systemic side effects you get with current treatments.
Which are a massive problem for people with chronic arthritis, right? Taking pills that affect your whole body.
A huge problem.
Yeah.
Traditional treatments, like taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs long-term, or even corticosteroids, they carry serious risks. Things like stomach ulcers, kidney damage, cardiovascular problems, because the drug is circulating everywhere.
So this gel,
Right.
it could be a game changer.
It really could be, offering targeted on-demand therapy only when the flare-up occurs. That could transform treatment from just managing symptoms to being much more proactive and responsive with far fewer dangerous side effects. For the, 600 million people estimated to have arthritis globally, that's enormous potential.
Incredible. Okay, next up. We have to touch on a much more contentious issue. A really sensitive debate that's flared up again involving common pain relief and developmental concerns. Specifically, acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol, and potential links to neurodevelopmental issues like autism.
Yes, this has come back into the spotlight, largely due to statements from the U.S. Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
What's he proposing or saying?
Well, echoing some previous cautions raised by President Trump, Secretary Kennedy is pushing to consider adding autism symptoms to the list of conditions covered by the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, the NVICP. And related to that, they've both publicly urged caution for pregnant women regarding the use of acetaminophen, citing studies that suggest a possible association with conditions like autism or ADHD in children born after prenatal exposure.
Okay, this is obviously a really sensitive topic for parents and expectant parents. We absolutely need to stress the scientific context here. This stance seems to run counter to what most major health organizations advise, doesn't it?
It does. And the science itself is complex and, frankly, debated. There have been some observational studies over the years that found a statistical association, a correlation between moms using acetaminophen during pregnancy and a slightly higher rate of autism or ADHD diagnoses in their children later on.
But association isn't causation, right?
Exactly. And many of those earlier studies had significant limitations. Things like relying on mothers' memories of medication use years later, recall bias, or difficulty accounting for why the mother took acetaminophen in the first place. Was it a severe fever or infection, which itself could be a risk factor? Confounding factors are really hard to untangle.
So what does the more recent, maybe more robust research show?
Well, importantly, a very large recent epidemiological study looking at over 2.4 million births specifically tried to address those earlier limitations. And its conclusion was that it found no definitive causal link between using acetaminophen during pregnancy and the later development of autism, ADHD, or intellectual disabilities.
So the biggest, most recent study doesn't support the link the administration is warning about.
It suggests the link, if it exists at all, is likely not causal or is much smaller than feared. That's why mainstream health bodies like the World Health Organization still emphasize there isn't conclusive evidence to tell pregnant women to completely avoid acetaminophen, especially if it's genuinely needed for high fever or severe pain, which can also pose risks during pregnancy.
So it's a real disconnect between the administration's cautionary stance, perhaps based on interpreting those earlier correlational studies, and the current scientific consensus driven by larger, more rigorous data which hasn't confirmed a definite cause and effect.
That seems to be the crux of it. It really highlights that tension between political caution, public anxiety, and the often slow, careful process of establishing scientific certainty. It's a difficult area.
Yeah.
Very difficult. Okay, finally, let's end by looking inside ourselves at the most complex piece of hardware we know, the human brain. Specifically, how memory works. Why do some things stick with us forever while others vanish almost instantly? Yeah, there was a good piece breaking this down recently. It really boils down to a few key factors why some memories get cemented and others just evaporate.
And those factors are?
Emotional significance, relevance, especially to survival, historically speaking, and frequency of recall, how often you access that memory. Our brain isn't like a video recorder capturing everything equally. It's more like an editor, constantly prioritizing what seems important enough to keep.
Okay, emotional significance, that makes sense. Why do those really intense moments, good or bad, seem burned into our minds years later, while yesterday's lunch is a total blank?
It's neurochemistry, basically. When you experience something emotionally charged, maybe something exciting, scary, joyful, traumatic, your brain releases a flood of chemicals, neurotransmitters like adrenaline and cortisol.
The stress hormones or excitement hormones?
Right. And these chemicals act like a tag, signaling to the brain, pay attention, this is important. This chemical surge dramatically boosts the process of memory consolidation, locking that memory down for long-term storage.
So mundane stuff, like where I put my keys, doesn't get that chemical tag.
Exactly. No emotional charge, no chemical flag, so the brain quite efficiently decides, probably don't need to keep this long-term. It gets pruned away quickly. It's actually a very efficient system, evolved to help us remember things vital for survival dangers, food sources, important social interactions.
But it also explains why we can remember tiny details from a childhood birthday, but forget a conversation from last Tuesday.
Precisely. It creates that fascinating, sometimes frustrating imbalance in what our incredibly powerful brains choose to hold on to. #outro.
Well, that brings us to the end of another pretty breathtaking deep dive. We've covered a huge amount of ground today.
We really have. From those mysterious dark beads way out by Saturn challenging our models, to the sheer speed of AI evolution with GPT-5 and that audacious Grok government deal.
Right, and then the sharp turn into those intense political pressures, the military shakeup at Quantico, the diplomatic friction at the UN over Gaza.
And we wrapped up with a look at the future of health, that smart arthritis gel, the complex Tylenol debate, and even how our own memories work.
Looking back across all of it, what's the connecting thread for you? That theme you mentioned at the start.
I still think it's that feeling of acceleration, the speed of technological change, especially in AI, and the pace of geopolitical shifts and tensions. It genuinely feels like things are moving faster than our collective ability to fully grasp the implications, let alone regulate or stabilize them effectively.
Yeah, that feels right. Which leads us neatly into our final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe ponder on your own.
Recently, Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN gave this stark warning. He said the global competition in AI is rapidly turning into an arms race that could pose an existential threat to humanity.
An AI arms race.
Oh,
yeah. So thinking about that warning and then considering the immediate government embrace of tools like Grok, the launch of PhD-level AI like GPT-5, the provocative question is, are we right now building systems whose raw power we basically understand, but whose ultimate societal impact and maybe even destructive potential we simply can't yet control or even fully foresee? What strikes you as the single biggest risk in this era of rapid acceleration? The thing that feels like it's moving faster than our ability to adapt.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. We encourage you to dig into the sources yourself if anything sparked your curiosity. Thank you as always for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.
We're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.